Here we are, Equinox Eve. It's the 22nd of September 2023, and I've just filmed the overview of the third Aicme, which I'm going to put on YouTube in a little while. Oh look, there's a mushroom. I've no idea what type of mushroom that is, but all this needs to be burnt, so I'm going to do that. A nice thing to do on Equinox Eve. Hello and welcome to the overview of the third Aicme of the Autumn Grove. I give it the title of Lunasa and the Honeymoon and the Descent into the Mysteries. This is the 22nd of September 2023. Tomorrow morning is Autumn Equinox. So this is Equinox Eve. Here in this diagram of the Autumn Grove, it's a diagram of the mysteries that are suggested by each quarter. And the Irish word for the quarters, which is Aicme, and Aicme means group or set, collection of something. But each quarter of the Autumn Grove carries a certain star law theme or mystery tradition to explore, changing stories as the year unfolds. But simplistically then, so looking at the bottom left-hand corner, you have the first Aicme, which is birch, rowan, alder, willow and ash. Now it's born of the winter solstice, which is the conclusion of the fourth Aicme. But born from the winter solstice, the first Aicme holds the Celtic festival of Imbolc, and it concludes with the ash tree, which is within the days of ash, the spring equinox. So each Aicme holds a Celtic festival and concludes with a tree that governs either a solstice or an equinox. So just to recap, the first Aicme holds Imbolc, concludes with the spring equinox. The top left-hand corner, the second Aicme, hawthorn, oak, holly, hazel, apple, holds Beltane and concludes with the summer solstice. And now we're at the end of the third Aicme. So the top right-hand corner is vine, ivy, broom, blackthorn and elder. The third Aicme holds Lunasa, and it concludes with the autumn equinox tomorrow morning. And the bottom right-hand corner, the fourth Aicme holds Samhain and concludes with the winter solstice, and then the whole cycle repeats. So looking at a close-up of the top half of that diagram, you'll see that there's a horizontal line and it's shaded underneath that line. So on the left, the line bisects the days of ash, and on the right, it bisects the days of elder. And you can see to the left and to the right, there's an arrow pointing up and an arrow pointing down. So at spring equinox in the days of ash, energy rises up through the second Aicme to the summer solstice. And then the third Aicme, which we're looking at right now, has the descending through, still in the lighter half of the year, but gradually descending until now or tomorrow morning, when we go through the autumn equinox into the darker half of the year. Already on the Autumn Grove YouTube channel, there are videos for the first Aicme. This is the thumbnail for it, which I called Imbolc, the water's edge and the salmon's leap. So you can go and watch that already. And also there is the overview for the second Aicme, which I titled Beltane, the Rites of May and the Summer Queen. So this video is the third in the series. And at winter solstice, I'll do an overview of the fourth Aicme. So just to recap then, the third Aicme, which we're overviewing right now, is the days of vine, ivy, broom, blackthorn, and elder. Elder takes us roughly to the end of September. I think the days of pine this year begin on the 2nd of October. It varies slightly from year to year because the Gregorian calendar is not the same as the seasonal changes, if you like, of the sun's journey around the ecliptic. I'm going to talk about star lore and this strange star map, and give you a little bit of time to absorb it. The main constellation is a constellation you don't hear of very often, and that's Hydra, the water serpent. So it's this big serpent spanning the whole picture. Now, if you look to the top right above the water serpent's head, it says Cancer. It's Cancer the crab. And this Aicme, the third Aicme, begins with the days of vine, which is in Cancer the crab. And so the head of the water serpent, Hydra, is at the beginning of this Aicme, the days of vine. And as we go through the days of ivy, and then broom, and then blackthorn, and then elder, we end up at the tail of the Hydra. So it's a very big constellation. It actually spans this entire Aicme. Now, importantly, and we'll come to it with the days of broom, on the back of the Hydra, there is a golden vessel, which is called, as constellation, is called Crater, the wine mixing cup. And it was a big vessel for mixing water and wine in sacred marriages and mystery tradition gatherings, which were often held in private houses. People would have put on a meal for the evening, they'd have the meal, and then after the meal, they would have some sort of mystery teaching in a domestic setting with chosen guests at your Roman villa and so on. But this constellation of the wine mixing cup is crucially important to this Aicme and also to mysteries in general. It's also known as the heavenly Grail, and in Celtic bardic mysteries, it's the Cauldron. Whether it's Ceridwen's Cauldron or the Cauldron of Annwn or the Cauldron of the Dagda, it's the Celtic Cauldron. And esoterically, it's your middle cauldron. And this Holy Grail, this celestial Grail, this heavenly Grail, is held by Broom, the Grail Maiden. Further along the Hydra's back is Corvus the Crow. It's an important constellation as well. So it's just a kind of point up that just as each Aicme holds a Celtic festival like Imbolc and Beltane, this Aicme holds Lunasa, but it also holds the sacred vessel for the alchemical marriage, the divine union between Lord and Lady, which can be an esoteric process within you between your eternal self and your muse. Very complicated things, but this wine mixing cup, and I can't overemphasize that, this wine mixing cup is there at the center of this Aicme And this Aicme begins with the days of the vine, the wine, the grapes. So it's been a bit contentious in some Ogham circles. There was a stance that the Celts did not have grapevines, and so some people use blackberry as a substitute. That's all fine, that's okay. But the Celts did have wine, and there's a YouTube video on our YouTube channel. This is the thumbnail for it. So you can go there and see the evidence I'm presenting for the Celtic gods of the vine. Vine and wine was a thing known about in the Iron Age times, before Rome even invaded the British Isles. The Iron Age Celts and Druids knew what wine was, and there's some evidence they were growing wine in Ireland very early on. If they weren't growing it very early on, they were certainly trading for it. So wine was part of Celtic culture, most definitely. On the left here is a god called Sylvanus. He's from Gaul, what we now call France. He's a god of wine, a Celtic god of wine. You can look him up on the internet. And on the right-hand side is another Romano-Celtic god of vine and wine, who we call now Sylvanus. And there's plenty of inscriptions of Sylvanus in Britain, in the British Isles. Curiously, like here, he's often depicted holding apples and grapes. And apple and grapevine are side by side in the Ogham. You know, apple is summer solstice, followed by the grapevine. And those two fruits are often depicted being held by Sylvanus. So Sylvanus just means of the woods, really. He's the god of the woods. He's the protector of the woods. So he's a kind of Romano-Celtic version of the Green Man, if you like. You know, he protects the wild forests, and he's particularly there to give forth the fruits of the forest, the fruits of the trees, the nuts and the fruits. So all-round good guy. An important insight, especially, you know, like God, even in South Wales, there's the temple of Nodens, and Nodens was equated with Sylvanus, and elsewhere Sylvanus is equated with Pan. So you can see him as a prototype of Gwyn ap Neath and Herne the Hunter, and even Finn MacCool. You know, these are the forest gods, you know, that look after the wild. To the Romans, they simplify everything. So all of those Celtic forest gods to Romans would just be Sylvanus of the woods. Ivy, following the days of vine, ivy is part of the evergreen pentagram, you know, which interlaces with the rose family pentagram. And curiously, vine leaves and ivy leaves were intertwined as a headdress for mystery school, mystery tradition gods like Dionysus, who's Greek, and his Roman equivalent, Bacchus. There are plenty of archaeology of Bacchus being present in Roman Britain, you know. So like I say, the vine and the ivy were combined and added to the wine of the Bacchanalian mysteries that gave people slightly mind-altering experiences to help them get perceptions of their eternal self or the other world. Now, we don't know who the Celtic equivalent would be of Dionysus and Bacchus, but a pretty much intelligent guess would be Lu, as the young heroic figure that leads people into light and inspiration. The Before we get to Lu, there's this wonderful icon from Hadrian's Wall, which is another mystery tradition icon. And it's a depiction of the Persian god called Mithras. Now, the important thing with Mithras is it's a vehicle for lots of early star lore understandings. And what they've done with this zodiac surround of Mithras is they have it so that Cancer the crab and Leo the lion are directly above the head of Mithras. Simplistically, Cancer the crab is the moon and Leo the lion is the sun. So in zodiac language, you've actually got the moon and the sun on either side of the head of Mithras. Now, the sun represents knowing, perception, clear thinking, just pure knowing. And the moon is reflected sunlight. So the moon represents reflective mind, thinking, contemplating, pondering, working things out, imagining, dreaming, you know. So it's almost an early way of showing two sides of one's mind. Nowadays, we might say left brain and right brain. You know, there's a daydreaming side of the brain, and there's a very precise analytical side of the brain. Really important for these kind of star lore mysteries of processes in the body. And because you've got the sun and the moon above the head, coming down the spinal cord, there's a planetary chakra system. Long-winded, and we don't need to look at it. We've discussed it in other videos. But what's important for the days of Ivy is that moment of transition between Cancer the crab and Leo the lion, that very center point of the third eye and the chakra system, your central alignment, is in the days of Ivy. So Ivy is holding that moon-sun balance. It's a really interesting thing to contemplate. The actual day that corresponds with, most of the time, is the 22nd of July. And for, 22nd of July, that very precise moment between the sun and the moon is the feast day of Mary Magdalene. So there's a whole load of, what would you say, pseudo-Catholic and medieval French mystery traditions of the Black Madonnas and Mary Magdalene, going right back to Isis and even Ishtar and Inanna, that hidden divine feminine of Sophia, wisdom, knowingness, gnosis, is this moment of the 22nd of July, this moment of the third eye between the sun and the moon, and the descending of that down into one's middle cauldron. There's a lot to think about there, and that's just the star lore of the third Aicme. So I would suggest that Lu, and I haven't got a picture of Lu, this is just young male god type to represent it. But Lu would be the appropriate divine masculine that during the third Aicme, because it holds the festival of Lunasa. The festival of Lu is where Ivy takes us to. And all of the star lore is suggesting this alchemical marriage. And it's played out in different ways in different Celtic stories. But the Lord and the Lady coming together at Lunasa. That's why I've kind of also given it the nickname of the honeymoon night, because the year's fertility is wrapped up in that. In the story of Ceridwen and Taliesin, she consumes the boy Grion back. She consumes him when he's turned into a grain of wheat, and she holds him inside herself for 9 months, and then he's born at Beltane. So it's very easy to go from Beltane backwards 9 months to see when he was consumed as a grain of wheat, and that is Lunasa. So there is Celtic lore of taking in the seed, becoming impregnated on a honeymoon night, the goddess of the land, and then as the 9 months unfold from Lunasa, come to Samhain and the seeds are in the ground, they're gestating, and you come to Imbolc, and it literally means in the belly, that the belly is showing that it's holding a child to be born, and then born at Beltane 9 months after Lunasa. This is why I call it the honeymoon night. So it's this, the wine of the mysteries, the ivy of the Lord, and his marriage then with the divine feminine at Lunasa. And in the Ogham Grove, this is Broom. Broom is the third tree of this Aicme, and Broom is mainly Leo the lion and a little bit Virgo, but she is the golden-haired summer queen. You know, she's the summer queen that's going to get married at Lunasa and have that honeymoon night. You know, and in Welsh stories, she corresponds perfectly well with Blodeuwedd, the flower goddess made of broom, oak and meadowsweet, you know. So the third Aicme has the vine, literally the wine for the mystery teachings. And then you have the Celtic equivalent of Bacchus Dionysus for ivy, takes you to Lunasa. And then there's the Broom, the golden-haired maiden aspect of Virgo, holding the position of Lunasa with ivy. And the corresponding star lore for the days of Broom have that wonderful constellation of Crater, the wine mixing cup, which I already showed you on the back of a Hydra that spans the whole of the third Aicme. You know, here's a depiction of what a crater would look like. A crater sounds like a big dent on the moon. It's not a moon crater. It was the original of the word Grail. You know, in Latin it was crater, and then cretalis is a variation of crater, cretalis, and then in Norman French, medieval days, cretalis became gradalis, and just like Celts do, drop their T's and their D's, gradalis, the D got dropped. So gradalis became gralis, gralis became this vessel for mixing the wine in various mystery traditions, remembered by medieval romances of King Arthur. And so what was originally just called Le Grail, the Grail, eventually became the Holy Grail, you know, and it became the cup of the Last Supper that caught Jesus's blood from the crucifixion. It's all a much later medieval Christianized version of something from the very ancient mystery traditions, which was this Gradalis, this crater, you know. And as discussed elsewhere, for Celtic bards of Ireland and Wales, it became just the cauldron. You know, the cauldron lore was very, very old, pre-Christian, of course, you know, plenty of evidence with that, with like the Gunterstruck cauldron and so on. But this is an icon Celtic from the Belgium area of Northern Europe. If you look at the bottom, you can see a crater. And on one side of the crater is a serpent, and it's a bit worn, but on the other side of the crater is a little lion, Leo the lion and the serpent, which is Leo and Hydra, the water serpent, and the heavenly Grail, heavenly Grail. Also shown here on a Mithraic tauroctony, you've got Leo the lion and the water serpent and the heavenly crater, Grail. So there's still a lot to learn, and you know, I'm still figuring things out. And but I've explained a lot of this heavenly Grail star lore in another video on YouTube. You can go on the Owen Grove YouTube channel and look for this thumbnail, the Holy Grail, and it goes into all of that star lore stuff about Crater, the wine mixing cup. So this diagram, then, this icon, it's pure star lore, combining the zodiac just as a way of measuring out the sun's journey through the year with the 20 trees of the Owen. So each zodiac sign has 30 degrees. Each tree has 18 degrees. You divide a circle of 360 degrees into 20 trees that have 18 degrees each. And this is how they correspond. So Broom, the Lunasa bride, is mostly Leo the lion, but she has a foot on Virgo. And that's what's crucially important, because Virgo is the great goddess of the zodiac, the great mother, the Magna Mater of the zodiac. But here she's triple aspected. So it's like three faces of Virgo, and the trees of the Owen correspond with that. So in the days of Broom, you can see I put a big golden chalice, you know, for Crater, the wine mixing cup. So that's the natural star lore of the days of Broom. And in her upraised hand, I've put a spear. And that's just a nod towards Lunasa and the spear of Lu. So it's just acknowledging Lu a little bit at Lunasa. So her right hand is on the moment of Lunasa. And then from Lunasa onwards, the next 18 days are hers. She's the Grail maiden, the summer queen. And she's the maiden aspect of Virgo. And then we come to Blackthorn. Blackthorn is the fourth tree in this third Aicme. And Blackthorn is completely Virgo. Both her feet are firmly on Virgo, and she's the cereal goddess, the goddess of grains, goddess of harvest time. Constellation of Virgo is always depicted holding a grain, an ear of wheat, you know, and the ancient mystery traditions, especially those of the Eleusinian mysteries, ancient Greece, were of the goddess Demeter and her daughter Kore, who became Persephone, you know, and it's all to do with this descent into the underworld, into the hidden world, you know, to the riches of the other world. I'm being very hesitant and vague about that because we don't know for certain what really happened in the ancient mystery traditions. It's a fascinating topic, and they existed for thousands of years. But the people that took part in them were sworn to secrecy. So we don't actually know what took part during these mystery rites. We can make educated guesses by looking at statues and iconography and little snippets that people have said, ancient Greek philosophers and so on. But for the most part, we don't know what really took part. Only that the people that took part in these mystery traditions, and there were lots of them, going to have to do a video on this topic, because there were many of them, and they would have all done things slightly differently, but they gave people belief in the afterlife. They gave people a comprehension or a knowing or a gnosis of their eternal higher self, so that they were no longer afraid to die, and they had some sort of proof of the spirit world, the other world, you know, however you want to get your head around it. Like I said, we don't know what individual mystery schools did. Yeah, definitely gonna have to do a video about that and open it up, because it's tempting. It's very, very tempting to speculate what were the Irish poets and the Welsh bards doing, because their stories and their poetry are blatantly singing about mystery school rites, mystery teachings, but higher knowledge of those who are initiated into perceiving inspiration as they knew it. You know, whether it's Imbus in Ireland or Arwen in Wales, these poets and bards were descendants of druids, and through their stories we can perceive songs about the other world and interactions with the other world. So, and it's played out here with the star law of this time of year. In Welsh mythology, Virgo, Blackthorn, is going to correspond with Ceridwen. You know, she's the cereal goddess. Gwion back sees the granary floor and lands on the granary floor and turns himself into a grain of wheat. And she lands on the granary floor and she consumes him there. She turns herself to a hen. But Ceridwen also has a son called Morvran. Morvran means the great crow. And on her part of the night sky is Corvus the crow, right beside Crater, the cauldron. So the cauldron, the crow, the granary floor of Virgo, the cereal goddess, is all there in the Ceridwen story. And she consumes Gwion back here at Lunasa, and 9 months later he's born at Beltane. So it's just a big suggestion that the Welsh bards were using mystery tradition patterns as they understood it, as they inherited it, maybe from the Roman occupation, or even before the Roman occupation. The Celts and Druids were trading with Greece, trading with Greek merchants and using the Greek language for trade. So those ideas of Dionysus, the god of the wine that they were trading for, they would hear these stories and these mystery teachings. You know, the ancient world was much more mixed than we realized. But we know nothing as well. So, you know, but it's tempting that modern day Druids, pagan Celtic revivalists, bards and so on, how would we redo mystery teachings and using the stars as a blueprint for the storytelling? Very, very interesting. I'm going to look at it a little bit in the fourth Aicme. On the 2nd of October, we go into the days of Pine, and I'm going to talk about the hypnagogic and hypnopompic phases that we drift in and out of when we go to sleep, or when we do a vision quest, or when we do a meditation or a shamanic journey. We delve into our dreaming self and come back out of our dreaming self. So in a way, we do that every time we fall asleep and wake up. But in a more focused way, you would do that in a shamanic journey. And a mystery tradition is that, kind of, because it's going to take you from normal consensus reality into some sort of visionary state, and then back to normal consensus reality. So it's a similar process. Finally, then, with the days of the third Aicme, the final tree is Elder. And she's depicted here half veiled in darkness, because the center line coming down through her, she is 9 degrees Virgo and 9 degrees Libra. And the very beginning of Libra is tomorrow morning, the autumn equinox. So Elder takes us from the light half of the year into the dark half of the year. So she is the high priestess that leads initiates through the veil. And once they're through the veil, they're sworn to secrecy. They're not allowed to talk about anything they learn to the uninitiated, only to their friends that have also been through the initiations. That's the mystery school way, you know. And we don't have, well, that's not true. I guess various magical groups have their own mystery teachings for their students. But it would be interesting to look ahead. And I think understanding the cycle of the year and the stories of the year and the stars of the year, seasonal star stories, and then re-looking at old Irish and old Welsh Celtic stories written down by the poets of Ireland and the bards of Wales, that there's a lot of astroarchaeology to learn, to figure out. And these are exciting times, you know. Every day begins with a different star story, and that repeats throughout the year, you know. So right now, we're about to transition from the days of Virgo into the days of Libra. And that's the maiden with scales. And in the tarot cards, that's justice. You know, the maiden holding a pair of scales. Just like Broom is the maiden and the lion. So in the tarot, that's strength. It's the lion and the maiden, strength. The maiden and the scales is justice, and the weighing of the heart. A lot of interesting ideas here with the whole heart thing, because Leo governs the heart. Crater, the wine mixing cup, the Holy Grail, is in the sky with Leo. So the Holy Grail, or your middle cauldron, is in your heart. And then autumn equinox and Libra, the washer of the Ford, Carliac, Fisa, is going to weigh your heart. How heavy is your heart? Are you being true to your heart? These are interesting things that initiates will have to be completely naked to and completely surrendered to being true to themselves. Not always an easy thing to do, you know, to strip yourself down. And who are you at your core? And are you doing what you came here to do? Are you living your true life's purpose? Are you following your vocation? Are you true to your heart? And on that note, we'll call it a wrap. I've got to go and light a bonfire. Thank you very much. Into the wild, into the wild, into the wild.